Hi liaisons, I am back for a quick video on the first day of class. Just some tips and pointers. I've taught different classes for over a decade with a Garland school and have kind of compiled a list of things that have helped me set good expectations with students from the very first day. So because we're teaching in an online setting, I would just remind students that it is their responsibility to figure out their technology. They will have had a 2U tutorial about the LMS, the Learning Management System. They will have a Zoom tutorial just like you did in your orientation. But I think it's important just to remind them you are not an IT person. They need to test out technology from wherever they're going to meet on a weekly basis, and that is their job. The other thing about the technology is making sure they know meeting in a public place is not the best idea. So I've had students meet from Starbucks. It feels very distracting as one of the viewers to watch people come in and out of a coffee shop. When the students talk, they feel like they can't talk as loud as they would normally because there's people around them. So I would highly discourage the students meeting in a public place unless it is an absolute emergency. Many of my students, I can tell they're in their bedrooms, they're at their desk in their bedroom, they've got headsets, they are, not distracted. So that's ideal. I would also say, this is number 3. So number 1 is making sure they figure out their own technology. And that goes for presentations as well. If they're going to upload something, make sure it works before the presentation. If they're going to show a YouTube video, making sure it works. Number 2, not meeting in a public place if at all possible. The other thing I would say, and I think you're going to cover this in your own orientation with Professor Zuniga, is making sure students have their camera on at all times if possible. So there are some exceptions. I had a student who was like rubbing her head like this, and I private messaged her and I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I have a terrible migraine." I said, "Turn your camera off." So I had a student last week come with a stomach bug and she kept her camera off. So there are exceptions, but in general, keeping your camera on shows us you're participating. I had a class a year ago that for some reason they were all turning their cameras off, and I had to nip that in the bud. I just didn't think about saying it because I thought it was a given. So that's what I'm saying about first day of class. It's really helpful just to name it all and put it out there. That's 3, the camera. Number 4 would be making sure you set expectations around class participation. So this goes 2 ways. For the introverted ruminator types, it might help if you strategize and ask a question in the chat box and then come back to it so they have a time to think. I really try to think about those introverts because that's not how I am, and I want to be sensitive. And then for the extroverts, participation is gauging yourself to make sure you're not talking too much. So you're letting other people have a chance. And I think we forget it works both ways. Like the self-awareness piece is like, hey, I need to speak up, or I might not need to speak up because I'm usually the chatty one. It is so crucial in a field class that they are participating in presentations, that they're asking questions of their colleagues, and I would remind them the first day of class that a huge part of their grade is participation. Okay, number 5, actually just said this, I'm sorry. This is about making sure everything's working properly. Number 5 then would be to go over the syllabus very well, remind them it's a contract. I am not a fan of extensions, and so I tell them that, like, you've got to figure this out. When these due dates are right now, extensions, and, you have some academic freedom to decide that. But it is really important when there's multiple sections of a class that everyone is doing the same or very similar things, because they will start talking to each other about Gardner let me have an extension and Smith didn't. So you want to make sure you stay in contact with those other section folks as well, which we'll talk about in our meeting in December. Number 6 or whatever number we're on, one thing I do, and you don't have to do this, but I have found it helpful to ask students the first day of class to send me to text me their picture and their cell phone number. And I save their picture with their cell phone number. That is just in case of an emergency or I'm running late. I cannot get to my computer to put a post on the wall about being late. And I could contact one person and say, hey, I'm running late. Can you put a post on the wall that I'll be there in 10 minutes? I seldom have to do that. I have not found that students have abused that. I think this term, from August to December, I have received 3 student text messages. So they are in general very, very respectful of that. And I tell them, look, I'm on East Coast time. Please do not text me if it can wait for an email. And then I tell them, hey, if I don't email you back in 12 hours, then email me again. So I try to set the parameters, text is I'm in the middle of assignment, it's due tomorrow, and I have a question, it's emergency. So I do like to have their numbers in my phone just in case. It feels, when something weird comes up, it feels, I feel kind of panicked if I can't get in touch with anybody. Okay. I went, number 7, oh my gosh, I've lost count of my numbers, 7 or 8. One thing I think is very, very important for online field is to set up, kind of normalize the fact that in a class of 15, say you have 15, we are going to have placements that run the gamut in every way, from clinical to not so clinical, from organized to not so organized, from great field instructor to not so great field instructor, to interns do a ton of stuff, to the interns having to advocate for themselves to do stuff. So it is really helpful, I have found, to say that, to normalize that the first day of class. Look, everyone's going to have a different experience. Some of you might have rougher experiences than others. Some of you are going to be in agencies that are like teaching agencies that have had multiple interns, have intern groups, have an intern manual, and some of you will be the very first interns at a placement. This is the one thing I wish I had done from the very beginning of my field teaching career that I didn't catch on to until 4 or 5 years in. So normalizing the differences, that there are all kinds of agencies, and in the end, if all goes well, everyone will complete their requirements and move on to advanced year. So I think just normalizing that there will be some folks in the room who have these glowing agencies. What I have found is if that's not named, then students feel, who are not in as strong of a placement, they feel like something's wrong with me, something's wrong with my place. And really the reality is some placements are just stronger than others. So setting up that expectations is really helpful. Okay, next one. You are more than residential liaisons. You are really in a new role, which is helping the agency get to know the Garland School of Social Work, particularly our 10th competency in faith and practice, which will come up, our documentation, which every school has different learning contracts, different process recording formats, and you are going to be the face of our school. Our student is, of course, but you are as well. And so your purpose is to be a literal liaison between the student and the school and the agency, which of course, like I mentioned, could be anywhere in the U.S. We don't have international placements right now. And your job is to help facilitate their learning as much as possible, to be their advocate in that midterm meeting, but to also empower the students to be their own advocate. That actually leads me into my next point, which is reminding them that you are there to help liaise, I think that's a word, to help them process, but they have to take the first step if something's going on in their placement to address it. So you're not going to just jump in and say, Sally Sue, supervisor, why is my student not able to see clients yet? We are giving that responsibility to the student and only stepping in when we absolutely need to. That's why we do a midterm check-in, is so that is a natural requirement of our program. They have signed off on that. They know that they have to do that. And to say hey, micro, meso, macro, how is this being met? The only exception to not swooping in is if there's a safety or ethical issue. And you and I need to talk about that quickly if that's the case. That's going to be another video though. So advocating for the student when needed, but allowing them to really learn how to do that for themselves if it is not a huge safety or ethical issue. So those are the first, a couple things I would probably mention the first day of school, the first day of school, the first class period. I would tell them a little bit about yourself, what your interest is in social work, how you work, do you want to be texted? Would you rather be emailed? Your typical turnaround time for those correspondences. And then you will be able to set those good expectations up front. Because I think that's a really powerful tool in managing the classroom, managing expectations, especially around field. I have found I'm learning so much in my new role about expectations in field. And I think if we can kind of set the tone early, it works much better. So that's my first day of class video. And if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it so that if I re-edit one day, I can add your suggestions as well. Have a great day.